Hello AP Stats students. This video is for those of you who were not able to make it to class on Thursday. We'll just kind of run through the information that we covered, and I want to show you how to set some things up on your graphing calculator to help you with the homework assignment that I have for you over the long weekend. So I hope you guys had fun helping with the rope course for those of you that were there. But let's get rolling here. All right. So today we're going to introduce you to the idea of transformations. We're going to start out with one of my favorite quotes from statistics. We say numbers are like people. Torture them long enough and they will tell you anything that you want. And that's really the big idea for this chapter. It's not that we're going to torture numbers, but we are going to manipulate them. And there's something that we want to get out of those numbers. And it's all going to go back to Chapter 3. Our goal here in Chapter 4 will be to apply mathematical operations that make the data linear. All right, we want to go back to straight line using a linear relationship. And the reason for that, if we can make the data linear, we get to use all the information that we learned about in Chapter 3. We get to use the idea of least squares regression line, correlation, residual plots, and R-squared. So Chapter 4, we are going to focus in on curved data. But our goal with curved data will be to straighten it out, make it linear, and apply all the same concepts that we did in Chapter 3. So the good news is we really don't have to learn a lot of new concepts. We just need to apply some concepts from last chapter in a new setting, and that's what we'll work on here in Chapter 4. Now, when I say we want to apply mathematical operations, what we need to recognize, if we go back to our Algebra 2 and pre-calculus days, is that if you look at all of these graphs, and all of these are just different functions that you've worked with before, whether they're quadratic, exponential, square roots, reciprocals, logarithmics, doesn't matter what they are, but all of these graphs have one thing in common. There's all a curve to their graphs. So any of these would be available for us to use to represent curved data. And what your worksheet is going to work on today is just exploring a bunch of these different transformations, saying that they're not always going to work, and different ones will work in different situations. And the good news for us is you don't have to have this great understanding of all of these different functions, because we can let our calculator do the transformation for us. So if we go back to that quote that numbers are like people and we can torture them, basically our graphing calculator you can think of then as our torture device. Some of you may already consider it that, torture for yourselves, but we're going to use it for torture on numbers. All right, so at this point, if you haven't already done so, you want to go to my classroom website, and you want to find this worksheet. This was the worksheet that I have for you guys over the weekend, so it's the Intro to Transformations. And if you can find that here right now, once you've got it found, go ahead and pause the video and input all this data into your graphing calculator. I'm going to walk through problem 1 and 2 with you, and we'll kind of explain what you need to do on this worksheet and kind of give you some hints on how to use your graphing calculator. So again, if you found this worksheet, if not, you can pause this video right here and input this data in, but grab your graphing calculator, get this data input, and then we'll go from there. All right, go ahead, pause the video, get it done. All right, so hopefully you have that data input into list 1 and list 2 of your graphing calculator. At this point, I want to scroll to the very end of the worksheet, and if you have the worksheet, go ahead and flip to the back side, and I want to look at questions 10 and 11. These are the last 2 questions, and these kind of help give you some direction as far as what you need to do on the other 9. So notice that question 10 says, what do you notice about R-squared as you work your way through problems 1 through 9? So on every problem that we do, I want you to find R-squared, and make sure you make note of that on the worksheet. Number 11 says, what do you notice about the residual plots in 1 through 8 compared to the residual plot of number 9? So I also want you to sketch out the residual plot for each of those problems. Now, there's some other things that it asks us to do, and we're going to look at those, but those are the 2 things that I really want to make sure that you write down on the worksheet. Now, I'm going to be gone Monday and Tuesday in class, but when I come back to school on Wednesday and we're all back together again, like one big happy family, this worksheet is what we're going to start with, okay? So I'm going to scroll back to the top, and notice for each problem, it's going to ask you to create a scatter plot, find the line of regression in R-squared, and create a residual plot. All right, and I want you, again, to focus in on R-squared and the residual plot. Once you get to problems 2 through 9, it's also going to include a transformation, and I'm going to show you how to do those on your graphing calculator, so it can save us quite a bit of work. So I'm going to go ahead and pull my graphing calculator up with. I already have the data input into list 1 and list 2, and so we're ready to go to work here. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a scatter plot. And so I'm going to go ahead and get everything turned on correctly. Scatter plot with list 1 and list 2. Go ahead and hit zoom 9, and we notice right off the bat, very curved relationship. All right. So at this point, once we kind of get the scatter plot done for each problem, we'll turn around and create our line of regression. So I'm going to do that here real quick. So I go Stat, Calc, choose number 8. I need to make sure I have list 1 and list 2 in here. You're going to play around with the lists a lot as you work through these problems, so you'll be flipping all this stuff back and forth throughout. So I'm going to go ahead and calculate that, and I can see that my R squared value is 0.7788. So that's a pretty solid R squared value, but the problem is it doesn't really apply in this relationship since the data is not straight. And that, again, is our goal here in Chapter 4. Can we straighten that data out? I also, again, want you to create the residual plot. So let's go ahead and do that now that we have the line of regression calculated. So we'll flip this down, change the y-list to the residuals. Remember, anytime you create a residual plot, the residuals always goes in list 1. Now, even as you apply your different transformations throughout this worksheet, residuals always go in the y-list. So don't forget that. You might want to make a note of that at the top of your worksheet. All right, so I'm going to hit zoom 9 so we can look at the residual plot, and we can see we definitely have a curved pattern here, which is not good. We already knew it was curved, and this just gives us more data to verify that. All right, so I'm going to go back to my worksheet here. So if I go look at problem number 2 now, it says we want to transform the x variable, which again, remember, is in list 1, and we're going to do that by using the list function, and we're going to define list 3 to be the log of L1. So the log is the transformation that we're going to apply in this problem. And if you look through all the other ones, there'll be different transformations for each problem. So we'll put our graphing calculator to work there. So I'm just going to go back to my stat menu. I'm going to choose my lists. I'm going to highlight the L3 name, and this is the key. You need to make sure that you have that name highlighted. If you have the name highlighted, you can put in a command for L3 that once you press enter, it will fill in all the data based on that command. So again, what we wanted to do here is we want to take the log of our x data, which right now is sitting in list 1. So I'm taking the log of L1. When I press enter, again, you can see it fills it all in. So this is the data that we now want to go through and basically do the same thing that we just did. We want to create a scatter plot using this data, a line of regression, and a residual plot. Okay? So if I go to my stat plot menu, now this is where we need to start playing around with lists. At this point in my X list, I'm no longer working with list 1. List 1 was the original X data, but we've said to transform that. So we're going to change this to list 3, which is where our transformed data is sitting. And then I'm going to select list 2 for my Y list. We've left Y alone, so we just use the original data there. So right now we're creating a scatter plot with the transformed X data and the original Y data. So we'll hit zoom 9. And what you see here is we have probably a worse curve than we started with. Now what that tells us is that this transformation isn't appropriate for this set of data. What we should end up with, if we find an appropriate transformation, is we should end up with a linear set of data. And we definitely don't do that, have that here. But we're going to continue on, find R squared in the residual plot anyway. Remember, I want you to do that with all the problems, just so we have something to compare in the end. So if I go back into my stat menu, we'll calculate again, choose number 8. Now this time again, I need to change my lists. Remember, we're no longer working with list 1 for X, we're now working with list 3, the transformed X. Y I can leave alone. We hit enter. And here's our R squared value. Remember, it was 0.7788. It's now 0.52, so it's gone down. Again, that tells us this transformation was not a good transformation. We made a worse curve, and our R squared has gone down. But again, each problem, I also want you to create a residual plot. So let's go and do that here. Remember, the residual list always goes in for the Y list. So I'll go ahead and switch over to the residuals. And we'll take a look at that. Oops. Let's try that again. Residuals. There we go. We'll hit zoom 9. And there's our residual plot, which again, very strong curve. Definitely, again, supporting the fact that this is not the transformation to use to straighten the data. So that is basically a walkthrough there on how you're going to use your graphing calculator to apply these different transformations. So I want you to work through the rest of the worksheet here on your own. have that ready to go for class on Wednesday of next week. Remember, I'll be gone Monday, Tuesday. But the answer key to the worksheet is also posted online. So if you want to check things over, it'll have screenshots of all the different scatter plots and residual plots that you should have created. And so you can kind of compare those and make sure you're doing things correctly. All right. Well, you guys have a great weekend, and I will see you Wednesday.